Here in Taiwan, we're still emerging from a bruising weekend, not just from the effects of a typhoon, but from an unprecedented attempt to oust 24 lawmakers accused of cozying up to China as Beijing ramps up military pressure and hybrid warfare on Taiwan. The Kuomintang denies any allegations of being pro-China. Civic group campaigners, eventually backed by the ruling party, wanted to unseat those 24 opposition lawmakers and 7 more next month for what they said were actions threatening Taiwan's sovereignty and democracy. But on July 26th, after more than 7 months of collecting signatures, pounding the streets and holding rallies, that effort failed in dramatic fashion. No recall votes outnumbered yes votes in all 24 electorates, meaning all 24 lawmakers retain their seats. Throughout the campaign, the opposition KMT and Taiwan People's Party maintained the ruling party simply wanted to overturn the outcome of the 2024 legislative elections. In retaliation, the KMT even attempted to recall the president himself. In an incredibly hard-fought and bitter campaign, opposition forces were unable to get any ruling party lawmakers past the initial recall round, especially after some cases of KMT forgery and other electoral fraud. So, what does this all mean now for Taiwan's polarized politics? Will the DPP be forced to compromise? What about the underlying issues at the core of the recalls and Bluebird protest movement? Now empowered, will Taiwan's opposition harden its stance? And why is China, which said it will take Taiwan and therefore change the status quo, celebrating the result? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Khvat. Today we have 3 guests representing the 3 stakeholders in this campaign: the opposition Kuomintang or KMT, the ruling Democratic Progressive Party or DPP, and the recall campaigners. They are, in that order, Huang Guibo, National Zhengzhou University Department of Diplomacy professor, former Kuomintang Deputy Secretary General; Vincent Chow, Democratic Progressive Party Taipei City Councillor, former political head of TECRO, Taiwan's de facto embassy in Washington, D.C., and Zheng Yueying, commentator on Taiwanese politics. Welcome to the show, Professor Huang, Vincent, and Yueying. Let's look at the composition of Taiwan's parliament, which has 113 seats in total. The KMT holds a total of 52 seats, while the ruling DPP holds 51 seats. The Taiwan People's Party, or TPP, are on 8 seats and have used those to consistently abstain or side with the KMT, giving the opposition parties a 60-seat majority and control of Taiwan's legislative yuan. We've just had the July 26th vote to recall 24 lawmakers, which universally failed. But on August 23rd, another 7 opposition KMT lawmakers are up for recall, having also passed through to the 3rd round. Now, while just flipping 6 seats would turn the balance of power in favour of the DPP, those KMT candidates next month are expected to have stronger support than their colleagues of July 26th. In this show, we'll take a slightly different approach. We're going to take a few statements made by the different stakeholders that have emerged in the aftermath of July 26th, and I'll put them to our guests for their analysis. The first is from the KMT. The Great Recall was a victory for the KMT, or the people of Taiwan, and a blow for the DPP. The KMT says the recall campaigners were pro-DPP. They say the campaign was actually a power grab by the DPP that failed. Vincent, what's your view on this?
I think they're ascribing a bit too much of the focus on the DPP when what the reality is that this was a grassroots campaign that was spurred on by a lot of unhappiness and dissatisfaction with the way legislative business was conducted following the elections in 2024. I mean, immediately following the elections, we did see this was a naked power grab by members of the legislature to usurp power from the executive branch, from the control yuan, and this was later ruled to be almost entirely unconstitutional. And as a response to this, they gutted the power of the Constitutional Court. I mean, these actions, one following another, created a sense of deep dissatisfaction that culminated in a series of protests that had taken place.
So you're saying this is not a blow for the DPP?
Well, I think it's a gross oversimplification to say that this is a DPP-driven effort and that this is a DPP power grab that failed. It's simply not true.
Professor Huang, why did the KMT insist on repeating that it was a DPP-orchestrated campaign? Let me just quote to you that campaigners included the True Blue Army. These were older KMT supporters who believed that KMT might be drifting away from its roots, moving closer to China? How does that fit into the narrative that this was DPP?
You can see that the convener of the DPP Legislative Caucus, Ke Jianmin, said so many times that it was him who planned or initiated this so-called mass recall. So I don't know whether or not I should believe.
Vincent, why did Ke say this?
I think he ascribed the slogan to himself in terms of there was a slogan that was used throughout the recall process saying, great recall, I think great success. And I think he's quite fond of saying the slogan originated with him.
He didn't mention the slogan, but the recall itself. So I tend to believe that, yes, it was planned by at least Ke Jianmin, the convener of the Legislative Caucus of DPP, then followed by some civil society organizations.
Ying, was it a victory for the people of Taiwan, as the KMT says?
The real win is not for any political party. It's democracy itself. It's a victory for the people of Taiwan. And a lot of people who agree to recall our lawmakers from blue camps are absolutely not the DPP supporters. They just see things differently, think differently. But they all think that we belong to one same country. They don't belong to any of the political party. So for the KMT camp to say that this is DPP orchestrated recall and campaign, it's absurd. The recall vote is really about pushing back and rebalancing the power structure in our legislative yuan, because we have seen our legislators, especially from those blue and the white camps, really bashing hard to hold the executive power and even expanding their own authority in a ways that is anti-constitutional. So, and on top of that, they effectively suspend the constitutional court. So the majority people in the public in the Taiwan Civic group took action on the street to campaign for the recall vote.
Let me bring in Professor Huang for a reply there. I think both of the other guests have effectively described a power grab by the KMT and TPP within legislative yuan. What do you say to that?
The power grab, I think that's unavoidable because of these very, close numbers for the both parties at the legislative. But I to be honest, I think if the recall campaign were focused on selected number of KMT members at the LY, I think that would be more reasonable. But now what we have seen is a recall beyond all reason, and it's a comprehensive recall for all KMT legislators. So I think that is part of the reason why some silent majority would like to go out and vote against this recall, because they do not think this comprehensive plan is reasonable.
Right, let's get to that a little bit later. So when it comes to the suggested reasons for the failure of the recall, campaigners said this: the DPP didn't do enough to support the recall campaign, and this was key to why it failed. The civil society network simply isn't as deep or extensive as that of political parties. So, Vincent, President Lai has just recently apologized to civic groups and DPP supporters and promised to stand side by side with them into August 23rd. Would you agree that the DPP didn't do enough? And why, if that was the case?
Well, when I first came on this show a couple minutes ago, you asked me why I was so tan. And the reason was I didn't go to Bali or, take a long beach vacation. The reason I'm so tan is because I was on the streets almost every single day, essentially standing shoulder to shoulder.
So the DPP did support this campaign? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is there's obviously differences in terms of how every DPP politician treated this issue. And certainly, there's not going to be a legally binding effort to say that you have to do this much. But I think most DPP politicians that I've interacted and talked to, they supported this from the get-go. To be honest, nobody wanted to be in a place we were a few weeks ago. Nobody wanted to be on the streets campaigning for a second time in less than a year, but they had to take place because of the frustration that so many people felt over what the KMT was doing in terms of that power grab, in terms of the unconstitutional measures, in terms of delaying and stalling and, in effect, taken away the ability for many government departments to function. For example, the control yuan at the time had no money to buy toilet paper. I mean, this isn't just, recalling isn't a DPP exclusive initiative. I mean, we saw KMT push forward on a series of recalls over past years as well. Huang Jie in Kaohsiung, Freddie Lim in Taipei, Chen Po-wei in Taichung. I mean, the KMT has done this many times, and they also failed a number of times as well. So there are natural challenges to a recall campaign, but I think we're going to do our best.
Okay, I want to address the point that Professor made in terms of, there were 31 out of the 39 lawmakers from the KMT targeted. This made it, a nationwide event. In the words of J. Michael Cole, was a campaign a victim of its own success? I mean, did it appear, that it was an attempt to overthrow the opposition KMT and drawing backlash from those supporters that were needed to support the yes to recall on July 26th?
I would argue these questions on the 2 points. And they all lead to one single fact, that it is simply just because the recall voting is not an effective tool to fix our current political gridlock. I'm fortunately to be a resident in the last 10 years in Canada and UK. They would put it to a vote of confidence and even trigger the re-elections to solve their political gridlock. But in UK and France, head of the government even have separate power to launch the re-elections. We see last year in June, President Macron, he did a snap elections and he retained a minority government. And unfortunately, in July, in UK, former Prime Minister Sunak, he used his power to start the elections, and then he lost the power in the process. In Taiwan, the president doesn't have this power, and the reason to stress this point is because this is not a personal issue. Although there are some legislators did badly themselves, misbehaved badly themselves, but in general, this is the political mess, political gridlock that in other countries, they would send all their members back to their constituency and do the election to find the new, fresh mandate from the people. But we just don't have that.
Professor Huang, were you surprised in these electorates? They're basically KMT strongholds. On July 26th, 6 of them managed, in 6 of the electorates, campaigners surpassed the 25% threshold of yes votes. That's significant, yeah? And then we know that before that, 10% across all 31.
Right. I think some factors contributing to this kind of results on July 26th. First, put most simply, the weather. The weather permitted, so people like to go out and vote. So the voter turnout rate was high. And second is, as I mentioned, that there's some overreaction or over-response from some civil society organizations on the streets for recall. So I think that actually really brought out some negative responses from what I saw as silent majority. And third factor might be that the sense of danger among these KMT supporters. They think if they didn't go out and vote, then probably KMT's legislature will be voted out after July 26th. So this
it was
sense
a
of
partisan
danger.
voting.
The party actually, I would say the individual legislators worked very hard, to protect themselves from being voted out. Right. The party is weak enough.
Let me go to the next question. Now, on Saturday evening, Taiwan's president made a statement on Facebook saying that everyone should respect and accept the outcome of the vote, describing it as a, quote, decision made by the people through the exercise of their constitutional rights. So the statement we're discussing is, despite the failure of the campaign against the 24 lawmakers, President Lai said the civic power shown throughout the campaign was not in vain. For example, it enabled the unfreezing of government budget. Professor Huang, how does the KMT see that civic movement? Does it see it as an expression of democracy, or?
Let me talk about the civic power first. I think William Lai has been clever to say that civic power shown during the campaign wasn't in vain, because I think he didn't refer to either side of the recall or anti-recall. So that is, the KMT side also thought that, okay, civic power was by my side because I won and I won big, so people spoke. I think that's what my interpretation is about the civic power. And of course, the other side, the recall campaign camp also can think, okay, our effort wasn't in vain. At least we know one another, we tried, and maybe we can do better next time. Okay, and as for the budget, I have to say that the budget proposed by the central government was the largest throughout the history of the Republic of China. And there, I think, was less than 2% cut in the largest budget. And, those frozen budgets were already released after meetings or reports by the executive branches to the legislative branch.
Let me quickly jump in, because there are a couple numbers that are missing, both from myself and from Professor Huang's statement, that we'll try to fill in. So the central government had proposed a $3.1 trillion central government budget. And Professor Huang's absolutely right. This is the largest ever budget ever. But it reflects, a series of years of strong economic growth. Tax revenue that had gone up tremendously over the past 8 years. So $3.1 trillion. The KMT and TPP-led legislature aimed to shave off $200 billion of that amount. So to go back down to $2.9 trillion, more than $200 billion were then frozen by the legislature. And so it reflects quite a significant amount of spending that was cut and frozen. But I'll say this, it's not so much about the figure as about the indiscrimination. I work in city council, much, much smaller budgets. I loathe indiscriminate cuts to the budgets, because you're not looking at what's been cut. You're not taking a cold, hard look at what you're taking away, because all you want to do is manage to say, I've achieved this amount in cuts.
I want to get Ying in. So talking about civic power on both sides, but analysts said that the KMT was unable to raise recalls against the DPP because they didn't have the civic power behind them. What's your view on that?
I would agree that very much so. Talking about common practice, and I don't think everyone would agree that to reject the national security bill over 500 times is a common practice. And no one would certainly agree that to reject the condemnation on the Chinese diplomat trying to near assassinate our vice president in Czech Republic is a common practice. Condemnation is necessary, and security bill is necessary. It's a must. So coming back to the civic power, they really make a tremendous impact in, especially these are the blue camp stronghold constituency. They manage almost single-handedly over 42% of voters, almost by their own. And this is the real momentum, if that is not what else would be. It really took surprise to expand it to a large scale of the recall. And it truly shocked the KMT's legislators as well. So they become intimidated and become quiet, and they even put some of the very bills that would anger the civic group on hold. So it literally just sent them all out to fight for their political survival. This is the civic power truly showing to the public, to the whole Taiwan. This recall right is legitimate. It belongs to our citizen. And the society of Taiwan, we settle the differences by voting in the elections. We express our differences, opinions in this way, and we are able to settle our dispute.
Now, China was also a stakeholder in this campaign. Civic group campaigners were angered by the moves to limit Taiwan's defenses against China and trips by KMT officials to meet with CCP officials, including Wang Huning, who is in charge of advancing so-called reunification with Taiwan. This was China's response to the results. Chen Binghua, China's Taiwan Affairs Office, said the DPP wanted a, quote, one-party monopoly and real authoritarianism, and it was, quote, against the will of the people. Now, this is in keeping with their previous accusations that Lai's administration is a dictatorship. Vincent, let me come to you.
It's obviously a bit rich coming from the Chinese, huh?
Yeah, aside from the irony of China calling Taiwan an autocracy, opposition parties were dissatisfied, though, Vincent, with President Lai's comparison of the defense of democracy to forging a sword by hammering out impurities out of the iron. How do the impurities relate to opposition parties? What was he trying to say?
Well, I think the key point is this, is that I think President Lai himself, I do think that a large segment of the Taiwanese population do want our society to come together on issues of national sovereignty and national defense. And there really should be no deviation from that. I mean, without our sovereignty, without our democracy, without our country, there is no opposition party, there is no democratic debate. And so I think the president was very much referring to having people try to come together on this critical issue, because that statement was actually made directly after the opposition parties had canceled their our anticipated turnout of them at this national security briefing. And I think President Lai's comments were a response to that. So I'll say this. I think China has always had one hand on the scale, one finger on the scale when it comes to Taiwan's democracy. So I do think that for China to come out and say these sort of things, it doesn't help the KMT, it doesn't help our democracy, and it's counterproductive to a stable and sustainable cross-strait relationship.
Professor Huang, it doesn't help the KMT. The KMT's come out and said that they don't want the CCP like this. But, you know, the talking points are quite similar. Eric Chu had called Taiwan Nazi Germany, or at least the administration Nazi Germany.
I cannot speak for the Chinese Communist Party. And I do think that from these statements you just mentioned from Beijing, I actually have sensed a huge distrust between the two parties, I mean DPP and Chinese Communist Party. DPP thought the PRC would like to annex Taiwan by any means when necessary, while the Chinese Communist Party thought DPP would be leading Taiwan to the path of Taiwan independence.
Xi Jinping and the CCP, they have consistently repeated that they do intend to take Taiwan. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, so that's what they said. But if you put yourself in Beijing's shoes, then from Beijing, you also see Ching-te, William Lai, the president of the Republic of China, said he is a pragmatic worker for Taiwan independence, which would worry Beijing as well. That's why the vicious cycle has been there, so we have to get rid of that.
Oh, okay. I mean, that was before he became president of Taiwan.
But he didn't deny that for any minute.
So. I mean, people do change their positions.
I think, just very, very quickly, I think President Lai was very, very clear on the campaign in terms of where he stood on the status quo and supporting that.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Ying, you know, the KMT says it's not pro-China, says it's simply pro-dialogue. You know, this would be a good position for Taiwan, given that the CCP refuses to speak to the DPP for various reasons, essentially because they accuse the DPP of being separatist, secessionists, etc. Why don't the recallers see the KMT's ability in a positive light?
Well, dialogue is good. Dialogue is respectful. That will all be welcome. But dialogue shouldn't be just determined by one party. Before the July 26 vote, Chairman Eric Chu says this is undemocratic. I would want to stress again that recall right is under constitutional, it's legitimate, it belongs to the citizen. Citizen initiated this recall campaign. It went as far as big scales for 31 legislators against the KMT. And in fact, the KMT also initiated the recall cases against DPP lawmakers. Simply just they failed. They failed spectacularly on the phase 1 by using this fraudulent signature and put himself in the position violate the law. So after the July 26 voting, Eric Zhu, chairman, he began to say this is the victory for the people, only because the result favor the KMT.
So you see a contradiction. You see a contradiction in that.
It is. Yeah. It's down now. I wanted to say, to celebrate, this is a win for Taiwan's democracy and Taiwanese people, because together we prove that this country is really free and democratic. Those who label others first as Nazi or tyrant, they just simply don't want to face people and addressing the issues concerns to ordinary people.
We're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Wang Weibo, Vincent Chow, and Zheng Ying for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.